When a manager says, "Can you put that in writing?" they may not be asking for clarity. They may be starting a file. When they say, "Let us bring HR into this," they may not be inviting a mediator. They may be installing a company witness. When they say, "You are not a good fit," they may already be replacing a real reason with a legally cleaner one. These phrases sound normal because they are engineered to sound normal. That is what makes them dangerous. They arrive inside calendar invites, vague feedback, follow-up emails, and conversations that feel casual until the documentation lands. There are 10 of these phrases, and each one has a job. For each one, the translation, what the company is actually building, and the countermove that protects your job, your reputation, and your severance leverage. None of this is paranoia. It is literacy. The company already speaks this language. You need to learn it before the meeting where they expect you not to. The first phrase, "Could you put that in writing?" Or its softer cousin, "Send me an email summarizing this." On the surface, it looks like normal corporate communication. In context, it is almost always the start of a paper trail. Watch when it gets used. It rarely shows up after a routine task. It shows up after you have pushed back on something, raised a concern, disagreed in a meeting, or flagged a problem with another employee. The manager wants your version on record while keeping their own response verbal and deniable. They are recording your input without recording theirs. The fight back is precise. You do put it in writing because refusing looks worse. You write it cleanly, factually, no emotional language, no speculation. You BCC yourself at a personal email address. You include a closing line that asks for their written acknowledgement of what you sent and what they intend to do with it. That last line is the one that breaks the trick. They asked you to commit. You ask them to commit back. If they go silent on the acknowledgement, that silence becomes evidence in your favor later. The second phrase, "I think we should bring HR into this." People hear this and assume HR is going to mediate a dispute. HR may sound like a mediator, but inside the company, HR is also a risk management function. Their job is to protect the employer from liability, not to advocate for you. When your manager reaches for this line, one of two things is happening. Either they have lost confidence in handling the issue alone and want a witness on their side, or they are building a witness file before formal action. The fight back has 3 parts. You never walk into an HR meeting without preparation. You request the agenda in writing before the meeting, even a one-line email asking what topics will be covered. You take detailed notes during. Within 24 hours, you send a follow-up email to both your manager and the HR representative summarizing what was discussed, what was agreed, and any commitments made. That email becomes your record. If they later push back on its accuracy, you have exposed a disagreement about basic facts, which weakens any case they try to build later. The third phrase, "You are not a good fit," or the cultural variant, "This is not the right cultural fit for you." That is why companies like this phrase. Fit sounds specific emotionally, but vague legally. Fit is unfalsifiable. It cannot be measured, contradicted with data, or fact-checked in a deposition. That is exactly why companies reach for it. It avoids specifics while still doing the work of dismissal. The tell here is timing. This phrase usually arrives after positive performance reviews, after a promotion, sometimes a few months after you have raised a complaint, taken protected leave, or pushed back on something. The inconsistency between your documented record and the new fit narrative is itself the red flag. The fight back is to force the conversation off vague terrain. You ask in writing for specific examples of where the fit issue has shown up. You ask for concrete behaviors, dates, projects. You reference your prior reviews. You make them either produce documentation or admit there is none. Most managers will not put fit complaints in writing because legal has trained them not to, which is exactly why this request creates pressure. The fourth phrase, "We are going in a different direction." This is strategic vagueness engineered to avoid anything actionable. It often arrives during a reorganization that targets 1 or 2 people while preserving the structure around them. Sometimes the direction is real and you were not selected for it. Sometimes there is no real direction at all. Either way, the phrase performs the same function. It removes you while making the removal feel structural rather than personal. The fight back is interrogation through curiosity. You ask what the new direction is. You ask who is leading it. You ask what skill set it requires. You ask whether internal candidates are being considered for new roles within it. You ask in writing. The goal is not to win the argument in that meeting. The goal is to surface inconsistencies. If the direction is real and you are being excluded, you create a record of being excluded. If the direction is fabricated, the questions reveal that quickly because nobody can answer them with specifics. The classic version of this plays out when a senior employee who was hired for a specific specialty suddenly hears that the team is moving away from that specialty. Within a few months, the role disappears. The role disappeared on paper before it disappeared in real life. Your written questions are what put that sequence on the record before the cut happens. The fifth phrase, let us put you on a performance improvement plan. Listen carefully because this is the most important pattern in this video. In many workplaces, a PIP is presented as a rescue plan, but employees often experience it as something else entirely. It can become a documented exit ramp, especially when the metrics are vague, subjective, or nearly impossible to satisfy. The timeline is short. The goals are subjective. The reviewers are the same people who decided you needed the PIP in the first place. The function of the PIP is not to improve performance. It is to create the legal record showing the company tried to help before terminating. The fight back has multiple layers. You read every line of the PIP before signing. You note every metric that is subjective, every deadline that is impossible, every goal that depends on cooperation from other people who are not bound by the PIP. You request specific, measurable, written criteria. You document every interaction during the plan. You request weekly written feedback. You complete every task and over-document completion. And from the day the PIP arrives, you treat it as the start of a job search, because in most cases, that is what it is. The sixth phrase, we have noticed some issues with your performance lately. The word lately is doing heavy lifting. The criticism is vague, escalating, and often contradicts your prior reviews. Things that were never mentioned before become patterns. Small details get nitpicked. The nitpicking gets bundled into a narrative. By the time the narrative reaches HR, it sounds coherent, even though each piece of it was manufactured in the last few weeks. The fight back is to demand specificity. You ask for examples. You ask for dates. You ask for which projects. You request your prior performance reviews in writing and compare them to the new criticism. If a manager who rated you highly 6 months ago is now describing fundamental performance problems, you ask them to explain the gap. Most cannot because the gap is the point. The criticism is being constructed, not discovered. You make them either produce specifics or retreat into the vagueness, and either outcome works in your favor. One more move. If they do produce specifics, you respond in writing within 48 hours, point by point, with your version of each incident, dates, witnesses, context, and any documentation you have. That response goes into your personal file and into your work email. Now there are two competing records, not one, and any later termination has to navigate around the one you wrote. The seventh phrase, your role is being restructured, or the behavioral variant, sudden removal from key projects, exclusion from meetings you used to attend, reduced workload, reassignment to administrative work below your level. This is manufactured irrelevance. The company is engineering a version of your job that justifies elimination. When the role is later cut, the cut looks rational because the role on paper does very little. Watch for the specific behaviors. The standing meeting that is suddenly recategorized as optional for you. The strategic project that gets reassigned to someone with less experience. The client account that gets handed to a junior teammate while you handle internal cleanup. None of these by themselves prove anything. All of them together form a pattern, and the pattern is the file being built about you. The fight back is documentation and visibility. You document every project removal in writing. You ask for written justification. You stay visible internally by maintaining relationships with stakeholders outside your direct reporting chain. You keep a running record of your historical contributions, the metrics, the outcomes, the deliverables. When the restructuring announcement comes, you have a record showing what the role used to be and what was taken from it before the cut. That record is the foundation of any later legal claim and any severance negotiation leverage you build. The eighth phrase, we need to discuss your future here. Or its physical version, a surprise meeting that lands on your calendar with no agenda. By the time this meeting happens, your manager has already had 3 or 4 meetings about you that you were not invited to. The decisions have largely been made. The meeting is not a conversation, it is a performance of conversation. The fight back is to refuse to walk in cold. You request the agenda in writing. You ask who else will be present. If HR is attending, you know what kind of meeting it is. You prepare your own talking points, your own documentation, your own questions. You take notes during. You send a written summary after. None of this stops the meeting from happening. All of it changes who controls the record of what happened. And the record is what matters 6 months later when the lawyers are reading it. The ninth phrase, HR will be joining our next meeting. This is the formal escalation marker. Up until this point, things might still be ambiguous. Once HR is in the room, the company has decided the situation has legal weight. HR is there as a witness for the employer. They will take notes. Those notes will go in your file. The meeting itself is often the procedural step before formal action. The fight back is preparation and parallel documentation. You bring your own notes written before the meeting, summarizing your performance, your contributions, your version of any issues that have been raised. You take notes during. You request copies of any documents discussed. You send a written summary within 24 hours to both HR and your manager. If the meeting includes accusations, you respond to them in writing, calmly, factually, in your own words. You never sign anything in that meeting. You request time to review. The 10th phrase, it is just not working out. Or the timing variant, this is not the right timing or role for you anymore. This is closing language. It usually appears in the final meeting. It is engineered to feel mutual, soft, almost empathetic. The softness is part of the design. The softer it sounds, the more likely you are to agree verbally, sign quickly, and accept whatever package is on the table. The fight back is the most important one in this entire video. You agree to nothing in the room. You sign nothing the same day. You ask for everything in writing, including the separation terms, the severance offer, any non-compete or non-disparagement clauses, any release of claims. You request time to review with counsel. Most companies will grant this because refusing looks bad in court later. The minute you create review time, your leverage multiplies because their internal timeline pressure starts working against them, not you. Now here is what most employees miss. The phrases are only the surface. Underneath them is the structural reality of American employment. 49 of 50 U.S. states operate under at-will employment, with Montana as the partial exception. At will means the company can terminate without cause and you can resign without cause. There are limited carve-outs, public policy violations, implied contracts, anti-discrimination protections under federal and state law, retaliation against legally protected activity. Outside of those, the company does not legally need a reason. The obvious question follows. If they do not need a reason, why do they document obsessively, run PIPs, build paper trails, and use careful language? The answer is liability. Even when termination is technically legal, the company can still be sued for discrimination, retaliation, hostile work environment, breach of implied contract, or wrongful termination under specific state statutes. The documentation is not a legal requirement. It is a defense layer against the lawsuits that follow some terminations. The triggers that activate this playbook are predictable. Budget cycles ending with headcount targets, new leadership wanting their own team, personality conflicts that nobody documents but everybody feels, stealth managed out tactics where the company makes the job miserable enough that you leave on your own and they save the severance. Liability protection after you have raised concerns about something they do not want examined. If you have been hearing some of these phrases recently and the timing felt off, you were not imagining it. Thousands of employees experience this exact playbook every year across every industry: tech, healthcare, finance, retail, manufacturing, nonprofit, government contracting. The script is portable. So is the defense. Short disclaimer. This video describes widespread observed patterns in corporate America. It is not legal advice. Employment law varies by state and by situation. If you suspect any of this is happening to you, consult a licensed employment attorney in your jurisdiction. Many offer free or low-cost initial consultations, and some work on contingency for specific kinds of cases. Now the war plan. The moment you identify 2 or more of these phrases in your situation, you start a private survival log, not on company devices, not on company email, on a personal device in a personal account. You record dates, exact quotes, the names of who said what to whom, who was present, what you replied. You forward important work emails to a personal address where legally permitted, focusing on emails that demonstrate your performance, your wins, your contributions, and any inconsistencies in management feedback. You save copies of your performance reviews, written compliments, project outcomes, and metrics you hit. You update your resume and your LinkedIn profile. You do not broadcast the update, you complete it. You start having coffees with former colleagues, recruiters, people in your network. You assume the search has begun, even if you hope it has not. You consult an employment attorney early, not after the termination. Early consultations are often affordable, some are free. The attorney can identify whether the timing of the criticism corresponds to any protected activity you have engaged in, like raising harassment concerns, requesting FMLA leave, reporting safety issues, or filing for accommodations. If it does, your leverage in any eventual severance negotiation increases substantially. While all of this is happening, you over-communicate professionally at work. You show up, you hit deadlines, you respond promptly, you keep your written communication clean and professional. You give them no easy material to use against you. The documentation goes one way and one way only. You build the file. They cannot. When the termination conversation finally arrives, here is the severance framework. Never sign the first offer in the room. The first offer is almost always below what they will eventually pay. Request time to review with counsel. Most companies will grant between 3 and 21 days, depending on the situation and applicable laws like the Older Workers Benefit Protection Act for employees over 40. Severance is negotiable across many dimensions, not just dollar amount. Base salary continuation, where the standard ranges from 1 to 2 weeks per year of service in many industries, but stronger leverage pushes that to 4 weeks or more per year of service. Health insurance, including paid COBRA premiums for 6 months or longer. A neutral or positive reference, in writing, with specific agreed-upon language about your departure. Outplacement services. Payout of unused PTO. Accelerated vesting on stock or equity, which in some industries is the largest single line item in the package. Mutual non-disparagement clauses, where you and the company agree not to speak negatively about each other publicly. Removal or narrowing of any non-compete or non-solicitation clauses that would limit your next role. Extension of stock option exercise windows, which can be worth tens of thousands of dollars by itself depending on the company. Your leverage points are specific. Institutional knowledge that takes a successor months to rebuild. Willingness to support a transition handoff in exchange for stronger terms. Any documented inconsistencies between your performance reviews and the stated reason for termination. Timing near any protected activity, leave, or complaint you filed. The company's reputational sensitivity, especially in industries where employees talk to each other and to recruiters. Any potential legal exposure their own documentation has created for them. Here is how this can play out. An employee with 7 years of tenure receives an initial offer of 7 weeks of base salary continuation, no extended health coverage, and standard non-disparagement terms. They request review time. Their attorney identifies that the initial criticism began 3 weeks after the employee filed an internal complaint about a manager's behavior. With that timing on the record and a polite written reference to it during negotiation, the final package settled at 6 months of salary continuation, 6 months of paid COBRA, an extended option exercise window, and a written neutral reference. Same employee, same termination. The difference was review time, documentation, and counsel. Prevention is the long game. From the first day at any job, you maintain your own success file. You save written compliments. You track your metrics. You build relationships outside your direct manager with peers, cross-functional partners, and leaders 2 and 3 levels up the chain. You assume nothing about loyalty or fit being permanent. The structure of corporate America does not reward that assumption. Here is the survival checklist to screenshot or write down right now. Document every concerning conversation in a personal log within 24 hours. Request specifics in writing whenever vague criticism appears. Build and maintain a network outside your current employer. Update your resume and LinkedIn before you think you need to. Never sign separation documents on the day they are presented. Always request review time with counsel before signing anything. Negotiate severance across all dimensions, not just base pay. Keep a copy of every performance review and written compliment in a personal account. Treat any PIP as the start of a job search, not a turnaround. Maintain calm, professional, written communication at every step. These 10 phrases are not predictions of certain firing. They are early signals in a system that has rehearsed them thousands of times. Recognizing them is not paranoia. It is reading the operating manual of the institution you work inside. The employees who know the manual outperform the ones who do not, in negotiations, in transitions, in their next role, and in their financial outcomes for years afterward. If any of this sounds familiar, the comments are open. Tell me which phrase you have heard or which one you are hearing right now. The pattern recognition gets stronger when people share specifics. If this video gave you something useful, the like button helps it reach the next person who needs to hear it before their meeting on Monday morning. Subscribe for the rest of this series. The next videos go deeper into severance negotiation tactics, PIP defense strategy, and how to read an employment contract before you sign it. Drop your biggest takeaway below. Someone reading the comments tonight is in the exact situation you were in 6 months ago. Your specifics could be the thing that saves them.